Hmm. At least that's that. I can capture 2. Desktop audio. Right, I'm in. Where's the last? It's going to take a while. Hold on. I definitely do need some of these ones. I'm hoping this isn't take. Okay, do that. Damn it. New World 8 needs to be in. Saves. That. Right, now I'm just got New World. Data pack. Data packs. This is awkward. What's data packs? We have to unzip it or zip it. Right, now we'll check if it's worked. Okay, just need to get that. Yes, it's worked. Get away. I forgot about this issue. Where is my Scooby-Doo? Why am I for Scooby-Doo? Ah, yeah, because I got talked about earlier. Eek. Bread. Still got some space. Is it through? Yes, it is. Oh. Not as much expected. Oh. Actually, keep the button. I need to look how far to get to the what do you call it? Nether roof. Make a couple of spawn up there. Boss, but the thing is, it has to be a specific spot on the roof as well. That's for a specific type of farm. I'm not doing gas farms, and before I say I don't have happy gas, so I can't do any of that stuff. I have to do reverse. There's a few mods I have to put in just to reverse it. Reverse the trial chambers and the woodland, I think I remember rightly. Right, oh. I have to do something about this anyway. Shame I can't do cornbread. Come on, you fruit basket. Oh, there you are, Papa. I got a bond to pick. Oh, no bonds on that one. If I had bone meal, I could harvest a lot of that. Actually, how much of that stuff can I actually make? First of all, somewhere safe. Actually, where's the backpack? Okay. Bloody hell, a lot more than I thought. Okay, yeah, need a lot more bone meal. No, sorry, I can get 7 at a time. Still. Boop boop doobie doo. Boop 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 boom. Fly me to the moon. So I feel amongst the stars. So like someone's got a chest tick off. You. Okay, back to defense. Alright, I need to definitely get a cat my campfire and a bit of carpet to go there. Oh, it's been a while since I've actually had a bed there.
You're one sentence away from launching your website with Base 44. Since the beginning of the internet, there's never been such a...
What fantasy race is obsessed with being the main character and thinks that all their daddy issues are much more nuanced than those lousy tieflings? If you guessed Aasimar, you are correct. Every Aasimar walks into a tavern thinking that they're too holy to be seen in such a place, but the reality is that they're here for the same job as the rest of the party. Remember, acting like you're overqualified for an escort mission is a surefire way to make sure that King never gives you all those missions that a chosen one is supposed to get. I get that Aasimars have divine blood flowing through their body, but it's still a mortal body, so you're gonna have to do some grunt work before you can afford all that cool angelic armor and achieve your goal of becoming the most annoying glow stick in the realm. I honestly think that Aasimars are harder to work with than elves, which is a quite impressive feat. You see, an elf will think they're better than you because of their natural talents and centuries of wisdom, but an Aasimar will think they're better than you because of a divine heritage that they treat like a trust fund. Throwing around the phrase, "Do you know who my father is?" to a bunch of adventurers who either grew up as orphans or also have magical ancestors doesn't really land the way an Aasimar would expect. You don't get it. My great-great-grandfather was an angel. Dude, all our great-great-grandfathers were otherworldly beings. Now help me hide the Baron's body. Aasimars act like they are the protagonists of the campaign because how can a descendant of a divine being not literally chosen one. The rest of the party must just be the supporting cast that's there to get beaten up by the villain, so when the Aasimar finally decides to take a swing and instantly kills the big bad evil guy, it seems like it was a hard-fought battle. At least tieflings cast themselves as tragic protagonists that still have to rise up and achieve greatness in spite of their flaws. It seems like every Aasimar sees themselves as a perfectly actualized individual even before the campaign begins, and each session is just another opportunity to applaud the greatness of said character. As a dungeon master, I understand that it can be a lot of fun to take someone's backstory and tie it into the campaign, because that can give each character a unique motivation within the campaign's world. But I'd hesitate to include anything resembling prophecy or even just a quick dream sequence chat with their angelic ancestor, because it doesn't matter if you plan that as a plot hook to be clarified at a later date. You cannot get between an Aasimar and their greatness. Their divine blood yearns for the approval of their celestial daddy, and honestly, it's on you for letting them know that they can become a saint in this campaign. Every Aasimar backstory has the same abandonment issues baked into it that you'd expect from a tiefling's upbringing, but this time it has a fun celestial aesthetic. Sure, your father was an otherworldly being that abandoned you before you were born, but at least they were probably helping an order of paladins protect the realm from some evil demon incursion. Yeah, that's totally the reason they never seem to answer your prayers. They are out there protecting every innocent child in the realm from wickedness besides their own blood, and that totally didn't give you any trauma growing up at all. Sure, you're way more emotionally stable than those silly tieflings because your absentee father is a much better dude. I feel like many Aasimars feel obligated to become a cleric or paladin simply because they view it as a class they were born to play. But the reality is that an Aasimar is able to naturally excel in most things because of their celestial powers. Just don't be surprised when your family is disappointed that you gave up a high-ranking position at the local cathedral to become a bard. That is basically the equivalent of telling your dad that you won't become a partner at their esteemed law firm because you decided that now is a great time to get a liberal arts degree and become a perpetually unemployed musician. Just because Aasimars are descendants of beings of holy light doesn't mean they can't have their own fallen angel phase. I've seen my fair share of people named Aurelio Lightbringer, Herald of Hope, go to the dark side and become Aurelio Nightbringer, Deacon of Despair. Even if you don't commit to the dark side forever, there is something fun about being an edgy Aasimar whose holy blood boils as you commit various atrocities. It's like you know that it isn't good for you and your divine family wouldn't approve, and that makes your act of rebellion that much more fun. I'm not saying every Aasimar chooses to start shopping at Hot Topic for an all-new black wardrobe and starts dyeing their hair black too. I'm just saying that if an Aasimar is starting to get stressed about the whole destined for greatness thing, they can try brooding in the corner of a tavern and see if that's something that appeals to them more. I think ultimately most Aasimars will realize that being a creature of darkness doesn't exactly work when your skin can literally glow, but I'm not going to be the one that forces them to take over the family business of purging the land of evil. Sometimes an Aasimar will have a celestial guide that's supposed to make the Holy Family business onboarding process a little easier. These guides present themselves as individuals that can give an aimless Aasimar purpose, but I honestly feel like they're there to keep them on a continuous performance improvement plan so that they can maximize their output without offering any real meaningful connection between the Aasimar and their deity. If I was constantly being micromanaged by a celestial deity that isn't really even the angel that I get my celestial blood from, I'd be a bit annoying to adventure with too. Like, this guy will come to you acting like they're your friend, here to help you complete your holy mission. But the moment you commit a sin or two to bond with your adventuring party, they demand that you atone for your crimes immediately, or else you are cut off. I guess Aasimars have to do the dirty work of the gods without actually getting their hands dirty. I wouldn't expect a celestial guide that has never had to do the job themselves to understand that things aren't black and white here in the material plane. People assume that Aasimars are nice because they are good, but you have to remember that many Aasimars are just a paladin at heart, even if that isn't the class it says on their character sheet. That means that you may encounter one that thinks minor crimes like littering are punishable by death. While I know that most Aasimars have empathy, you have to be careful to not make them think that you're standing in the way of them achieving their destiny. Would it be better if every Aasimar was a paladin disapproving Celestial Daddy and a team of micromanaging Celestial Guides, there are a lot of people that will yell at them anytime they do something even a little evil. It doesn't make me think they're any less annoying for shutting down the party's fun plan, but I do understand why they do it. If by some miracle the Aasimar is actually pretty lax when it comes to obeying the law and serving their divine purpose, it's going to be very hard to convince the criminals you interact with that they're in fact not a paladin. So, whether intentional buzzkill or not, the Aasimar is going to be hard to bring around in any campaign that requires the party to break the law. Even if the poor guy hides his appearance, refuses to speak, and just tries to tag along with the party, the warm glow of his angelic skin will alert every guard within a mile. It is pretty hard to break into the king's castle when you're walking around with a human-sized glow stick. So yeah, Aasimars, the self-righteous, self-illuminating, and self-proclaimed heroes of the fantasy world. In reality, they're divine middle managers who have a martyr complex because they get beaten up by divine upper management all day and only inflict a fraction of that wrath onto the rest of the adventuring party. However, it is usually hard to find a person that is willing to be a dedicated healer. So when you find someone whose whole aesthetic screams divine user, that makes them someone very desirable in an adventuring party. And while the Aasimar may claim that they're above hanging out with a bunch of murder hobos, they seem to have the party's back when things get really dire. But I cannot stress enough that they will constantly let you know what you're doing is wrong before helping you do it. That is why Aasimars are fantasy's most heavenly hall monitors. What fantasy race is so insecure about their looks that they had to put their lineage in their name so you wouldn't keep asking if they're lizard folk? If you said Dragonborn, you'd be correct. When you get told that you can't play a dragon in your tabletop game, you'll likely end up picking these guys because you saw their name, but very quickly you find out that you are looking for a half dragon. You know, the one with wings, claws, and the ability to actually breathe fire. Although these guys are usually well over 6 foot, you can't help but feel like they lied to you on a dating profile because they really exaggerated their dragon traits. In some lore, they even claim that their ancestors totally had wings until they lost their noble status. You want me to believe that their flight speed is tied to their notoriety? So what, if you become a mayor and run a successful business, does that mean your kids will get the glide ability? Yeah, right. Normally, races with a cool magical lineage get cool powers to go with it. Dragonborns just have a family history of acid reflux that lets them burp out a few sparks that they swear is the same as a breath weapon. The only reason I even believe that they are Dragonborn instead of a lizard folk with an odd skin condition is because they mention their daddy issues about as often as a tiefling. Don't let them gaslight you, ladies. Most of them don't even have a tail. You want to date a dragon person without a tail? Dragonborn are known for their ability to be a complete buzzkill in their quest to preserve their people's honor. I guess they saw how much flack paladins get for being the party's hall monitor, and for some reason they decided that this was actually their true calling in life. So, no matter what class and backstory they play, you can look forward to their constant cosplaying as a dragon and LARPing as a paladin. And if they actually are a Dragonborn paladin, that means they bought into their own hype, and probably think they are the chosen one who will finally bring their clan to greatness. I don't have the heart to tell them that dragons could care less about the prosperity of Dragonborn. In fact, they may somehow care less about Dragonborn than they do about kobolds, which is saying something. That won't stop them from constantly trying to restore honor to their clan in a futile attempt to get their dragon daddy's approval. Half the time, they don't even know for sure which one they're supposed to be a descendant of and just default to one of the big ones. I really want to feel bad for the Dragonborn and their constant need for approval, but I can't because they won't shut up about it. Plus, they'll be the first to shame the party for being reckless and selfish, but then given the chance themselves, they'll jump into battle, aiming for that honorable death to immortalize themselves to their fellow Dragonborn. Tiamat still doesn't care, dude. Have you ever noticed that every time a Dragonborn introduces themselves that their name gets longer? I've never met a fantasy race that likes names as much as them. They'll have their birth name that, if you're lucky, will be short like Rogar. Then of course they get a clan name, so it'll be like Rogar of Clan Who Gives a Damn. Most people would stop there, but Dragonborn aren't most people. Then they have to add themselves as Rogar, who gives a damn shield chomper, the holy flame of the Northwestland and blessed protector of the East Southland. Which, mind you, while I'm sure the townsfolk at the time appreciated the party defending the orc hordes heading their way, if these peasants had to sit through the Dragonborn's introduction every time they encountered him in town, I bet they would be begging for the orc raiders to return to finish them off. The only thing worse than a noble who tries to throw their name around to get free stuff is a washed up one that still thinks anyone cares about them. Sure, maybe people are willing to put up with your ridiculous 20-syllable name when you could have had them executed, but having the party have to sit through it at a tavern when you're ordering an ale is a bit much. At best, you'll get a bartender that is old enough to recognize a last name and go, "Oh yeah, I remember hearing about that clan. Shame what happened to them." I'm half convinced that the Dragonborn sacrificed the flame pouch in their throat that helps them breathe fire in order to make room for a larger larynx. With vocal cords strong enough to handle the endless amount of yapping this character needs to spew, Dragonborn will bring up the entire unabridged history of their people if you just make eye contact with them. If Dragonborn are truly trying to live up to their name, then why are all them broke adventurers? They talk a big game and claim to enjoy the finer things in life, but every Dragonborn that I've seen has spent most of their days taking odd jobs and camping in the woods. Call it adventuring all you want, but a true dragon would be amassing wealth in a way that doesn't have them at the beck and call of whichever townsfolk happens to have 100 gold on them. And for the record, liking jewelry and gold doesn't make you a dragon by itself. Everyone likes having money and power, but a dragon will actually strike fear in the hearts of entire kingdoms. People willingly give away their treasure to these dragons to avoid their wrath. No one is afraid enough of a dragonborn to do that. Maybe it's the fact that a dragon can actually fly to their town and raise it to the ground. For some reason, Dragonborns feel like they have a unique struggle because they are outsiders with strange blood coursing through their veins. But let's just take a moment to think about the dozens of fantasy races that have some random magical blood in their lineage. Just about every magical creature that you can think of has slept with a human and has resulted in a new fantasy race. I'd even argue that a race like Tieflings has it much worse because there is no sense of communal pride among them. In fact, many of them feel a deep shame and choose to run off on their own because of it, which puts them in a much better position than most. Plus, Dragonborn have their clans to lean on for help. So are you just mad that their clans are run worse than dwarves? Is it possible that this fantasy race is more smug than an elf and more stubborn than a dwarf? Yikes. The one thing a Dragonborn actually does have that you can find in a real dragon is a sense of superiority. They somehow manage to cram a gargantuan-sized ego perfectly into a medium-sized humanoid creature. Every Dragonborn must have little man syndrome because they think they're these big scary dragons while being a tenth of their size. And when you take into account their lackluster damage resistances and breath weapons, alongside their complete lack of wings or a tail, it is kind of impressive that they have an ego at all. At least Tieflings look like they could be a direct descendant of whatever hellspawn they came from. Most Dragonborn look like the domesticated house pet version of a dragon at best. Their teeth are such a non-factor that I don't even think they get a bonus for biting anyone, even though any real dragon would have that as their go-to method for finishing off their vastly outmatched prey. So yeah, Dragonborn, the most overconfident and underwhelming dragon-adjacent race in fantasy. They'll keep trying to bring honor and glory to both the party and their clan, even if they will likely never achieve these ambitious goals. And in a world where most adventurers are only in it for their own personal gain, it's just nice to know that you have a big lizard man at the table who isn't going to backstab you just because you happen to grab a piece of loot they wanted, which again kind of hurts their case of being just like a dragon. That is why Dragonborn are fantasy's most delusional reptiles. What fantasy race lives in total darkness, commits unspeakable war crimes, and looks like they're trying to bring back the goth movement? The answer is Drow. Drow are maybe the only elves that should have dark vision, given the fact that they live in the Underdark, which is just a giant cave system that they've convinced themselves is an underground nightclub scene. Listen, your civilization isn't some hidden gem that people are dying to get into, and in spite of them living in this literal hellscape underground, they'll act like you're the one living in a hole. They'll frown on surface dwellers for lacking sophistication, while they live in a fungus-covered cavern giving off toxic fumes and have to brush away about 1,000 spiders off their bed before going to sleep for the night. Let's make some things clear, Suspicious Webweaver. The only reason you constantly throw shade is because you're allergic to sunlight. Drow culture runs almost almost entirely on backstabbing others to gain a tiny bit more power, which makes every Drow government basically a multi-level marketing scheme where if you murder 2 of your friends and amass the power they got from murdering 2 of their friends, and repeat the process a couple of times, you eventually get to have the same quality of life that most surface-dwelling elves get without having to murder their entire extended family. It seems like Drow society treats betrayal like some kind of Olympic sport, because whoever betrays the most people is celebrated like a champion instead of a bad person. This must be great for more ambitious Drow, because whenever they go to the HR department to complain about their boss, the lady at the desk just hands them a poison dagger. But if you're even a slightly sane Drow, that means you have to skip town before anyone else catches on, because they'll confuse your humanity for weakness. Every Drow player claims to be a tortured anti-hero. Even if half the party is haunted by their past, the Drow will claim that only their edge is truly justified, which is a bit insulting to the half-elf rogue that has been brooding and monologuing in the dark corners of the inn way before people considered Drows as a playable character option. If you want to sit on the opposite side of the tavern as him, sharpening your daggers and muttering about your heritage, that is fine, but we respect our elders here. Either all of it is cringe or none of it is cringe, buddy. Wearing all black and having an ancestor who is the literal manifestation of evil isn't unique to Drow. In fact, I can probably name more fantasy races capable of having that backstory than I can't. And that is only because people keep telling me that gnomes aren't inherently evil, but I've seen the horrors that they inflict on campaigns. You can't fool me. Lolth is less of a deity to the Drow and more of an abusive cult leader that's entire thing is constantly telling her followers that they aren't doing enough. Like, let's talk about the fact that she'll randomly make 2 of her most loyal followers fight to the death and only give a temporary blessing and the ability to keep the loser's possessions as a reward. Killing off half of your most promising recruits doesn't really sound like an effective way to grow a religion or run a civilization. While elves are often mocked for being talented but not willing to do anything productive, I'd argue that Drow are just as talented and much more ambitious, but as a society, they constantly self-sabotage. Drow are better off worshipping the Dungeon Master at this point, because if they're already going to randomly kill and loot everything that their deity puts in front of them, then let their deity ban PvP among Drow and grant them blessings in the form of XP. The Underdark is basically just an infinite monster spawner, so there will be no shortage of targets to satisfy the Drow's bloodlust. Kick Lolth to the curb, give them a month or 2 without engaging in betrayal, and they'll level up enough to be able to conquer the surface world. I'm not saying that Drow culture is designed specifically to resemble a BDSM kink, but I am saying that if you were to create a fantasy race that does all those things, that you'd end up with something resembling the Drow, but hopefully with a lot less spiders. Call me a prude, but I like my bedroom completely free of spiders. I actually love the gothic aesthetic, and with everyone having dark vision, you can't really blame them for every temple being dimly lit. But anyone that has tried to use a whip inside an enclosed area knows that Drow have better weapon options for close quarters combat. You already know that I think that their Spider Queen isn't exactly a positive influence on Drow culture, but I like her influence on Drow society even less when I start to think about all her most loyal followers just being simps. Every Drow player will constantly let the party know that they are not like the others. Half the time, they end up still being evil for fun and have to be kicked out of the party, but they'll claim that their siblings were way worse, as if that excuse would let them off the hook for robbing every villager they come across. I get that Drow families can be rough, but the real reason that you left the Underdark isn't because you were a better person. It was because you were looking for easier lives. Half of the time, they were only actually telling the truth about being good. Somehow, they grew up with people trying to corrupt their heart of gold from a young age, and still came out the Underdark as a saint in the making. You know what that makes them, though? Stubborn and foolish, because they aren't looking for a redemption arc for themselves. They're trying to redeem their entire people. Very rarely will you see a Drow be on a personal redemption arc to atone for their own sins. It's funny when you think about it. They are still betraying the other Drow, but this time it's because they are a good person. Drow like to commit atrocities and think they have perfected them. It isn't good enough for Drow to do evil things for personal gain. They have to pretend like their vile acts are part of a personal lifestyle brand. As much as I'm sure that a cosmetic brand called Sacrifice by Lolth could make a killing on the retail shelves, just like it does in dark temples throughout the Underdark, people don't really care how on-brand that spider-shaped knife punishments like, we massacred an entire city in the name of our goddess. Oh, so you're like the orc raiders that my party defeated at level 3? You know, just because your bad deeds are done in a way that looks expensive, that doesn't make them art, right? It just makes them extra. The truth is that the Drow, under all that pageantry, are just another faction in the Underdark that likes enslaving people and killing anyone who is dumb enough to travel near their settlements. In fact, if they hate their fellow houses and actively kill any merchants that try to come into town, I don't even know how the Drow have anything nice at all. Surely half the items circulating the Drow economy are actively harmful to the consumer, and the rest are cheap knockoffs. So yeah, Drow, everyone's favorite subterranean elf variant, and the drama queens of the Underdark, that think good taste makes up for bad actions. They may in fact be the hardest working elves in your campaign setting, but that doesn't mean that they're always working in the party's best interests. I'd avoid letting them take the first watch during your adventures on the road until you get a better idea of their motivations. If you manage to go a couple weeks without them stabbing someone to death that you told them not to, you're in luck. A Drow that's able to shake their murderous impulses is definitely a capable ally to have in your journeys. Just make sure to get them a stylish umbrella with a blade in the hilt to help them with their light sensitivity. A Drow will always respect something that can help them be functional and fashionable on the battlefield. Sure, they may use it off the battlefield too in order to get a cheap shot in, but you can't expect them to fully change their ways. That is why Drow are fantasy's most fabulous war criminals. When you think of these things, what fantasy race comes to mind? That's right, kids, dwarves.